Chapter 42, The North Pole. Madison realized they had cut to a new world and reached for her earring. It was still on her ear. "How did you do that?" she demanded of 316. "And why didn't you warn us first?" said Ryan irritably. "I am sorry," 316 said. "As soon as I saw him, I lost my temper. I do not always think clearly in his presence. The Los Angeles is equipped with a large monopole magnet affixed to the hull." "So we're in another universe?" asked Madison with growing unease. She slipped down from her seat and cautiously approached 316, who was observing her with curiosity. He was still seated in his chair. His red boots were swinging off the front of his seat. Madison slowly reached her hand out to touch the closest of his arms. Ryan realized what she was doing. "Maddie, no!" She grasped 316 firmly on his wrist. Nothing happened. "Is this a murder attempt?" "I assure you I am quite awake," said 316 with a touch of humor. Madison sighed in relief and moved closer. She hugged 316's head and kissed him. "That was reckless, Maddie," admonished Ryan. "What if he was like Vogel? You might have died." "I feel there is something I have not been told," complained 316. "It's the lines," said Madison as she returned to her seat. "They have to be untwisted before you can cut to another universe. Otherwise, you end up broken like the man that kidnapped Daniel. Ryan and I had it done before we left." "Do not worry, Madison," said 316 confidently. "Daniel explained this to me, and I went for a swim last night. I untwisted myself." Madison recalled her own ordeal in the armory and was impressed that 316 managed to accomplish the same result all on his own. "So, did you use a machine to tell you which line to untwist next?" 316 seemed taken aback by this. "No, I do not need a machine to remember my movements." Ryan's jaw dropped. "You mean you remember every movement you have ever made in your entire life?" "Of course." "Do you not?" said 316. Madison and Ryan both laughed. No, we don't have anything approaching that level of recall," said Ryan. Madison gave her head a quick shake to discard the unpleasant thought of storing that staggering amount of data. "All right, then. So, is this the cave world?" she asked. "No," 316 said. "Not your cave world. Do not worry. I can fix this. We do not need to wait 12 hours. If we continue north to the pole, where the Earth is spinning slower, we can go in any direction immediately." "And how far away is that?" demanded Ryan. 2 hours at maximum speed." "I am sorry. Would you like some fish?" "No," they said in unison. "This world is pretty bleak," said Madison, finally taking time to notice the view. The treeless grasslands were now showing the first patches of snow. "If we're that close to the North Pole, it's Arctic tundra. I wouldn't judge our own world based on just that," said Ryan. "I guess," Madison agreed. "Are we sure it's not the cave world? How would we know?" "We went too soon," said 316 apologetically. "When we get to the pole and cut again, we will be back at my world. We can then change direction and cut again to the world you visited before mine. We will soon know if this theory works. Would you like a tour of the rest of the ship?" He slipped out of his chair. "Sure, as long as there's no more fish," said Ryan sarcastically. "Oh, there is always more fish," said 316 brightly. Madison followed them to the airlock, and they all donned their oxygen masks. A spiral staircase just outside the bridge took them up one deck to the sleeping quarters. Rather than one large open room, it was a hallway very much like a hotel. 316 opened the first door, and they filed in. One entire wall was a floor-to-ceiling window which could be changed opaque with a hand gesture near a plaque on the adjoining wall. 316 demonstrated its use and moved on to show them the large bathroom complete with bathtub. "Dibs on the master suite," shouted Madison when she saw the tub. All cabins are identical, 316 said. Uh, how many cabins are there? Asked Madison, amazed at the speed with which 316 could manufacture seemingly anything. Only 15 at present, but there is ample room for 4,000. Why did your people make vessels so large? They didn't. Well, not the ones that flew like this. Even modern cruise ships aren't this huge, and they only float. Why did you make this one so big? It was a mistake, but now that I have it, I can use it to invade your world with an army of my people. Can you guess how we will defeat you? By murdering us in our sleep? Said Madison tentatively. She was only half sure that 316 was joking. 316 made a chittering sound that was unmistakably laughter. Exactly. You are finally understanding our humor. Ryan gave Madison a worried look as they exited the cabin. They toured several more identical rooms before they could convince 316 that they had no interest in seeing all 15. Can we see the engines? Asked Madison excitedly. Of course, 316 said. They are outside the hull, but they retract for maintenance and when we travel to other worlds. Follow me. The closest engine was up one deck and more than halfway back toward the tail. It had been rotated into the interior of the ship. The single propeller had only 2 blades and was made of a tight-grained hardwood. I expected something a little more modern, said Madison, trying to hide her disappointment. This is one of the 5 used for historical authenticity. It is driven by an electric motor, which is not authentic. I did not have enough details for a diesel engine, but I will build some when I do. The other 5 engines that we are using right now are much more modern, very similar to turbofans. Aha, I was wondering how you got 500 miles an hour from a wooden prop, said Ryan. 316 laughed. Oh no, they would break. These are just for parades and showing off. I can show you one of the good ones, but it will slow us down to retract it. Never mind then, said Madison, not wanting to slow their progress. We can look at it later. We need to concentrate on getting to Daniel. On the way to the North Pole, they discussed the books 316 had read. Natalie's tablet also had several movies, but he said that consuming content in that way was far too slow. 316 explained that everything about the biology of his species was based on the number 5. In addition to 5 limbs, each with 5 digits at the tips, their brains were also segmented into 5 parts. He could perform 5 complex tasks simultaneously. 5, said Ryan, and that doesn't get confusing? Sometimes. Most of the time there aren't 5 interesting puzzles to solve, so it's unusual to use all 5 at once. How many simultaneous tasks can your species perform? I can weld, listen to music, and chew gum. Does that count? Offered Madison. I saw a guy play 3 musical instruments at the same time, but it was the same song, said Ryan meekly. None of these things require problem-solving. I have found that that is the difference. I can carry on many times 5 conversations at once when I communicate on the network, but 5 is the limit for puzzles. Perhaps it is the history of my species that created the need. How did your species rise from simpler animals, Ryan? Well, obviously, explained Ryan patiently, we don't know for sure because it was so long ago and nobody was around to take notes. We think a species of primates began spending more time on the ground in the grasslands of Africa. The predation pressures and a changing environment triggered brain growth, along with the need for more complex communication. Madison gave him an odd expression. I like documentaries, he said defensively. You do not know? 316 said. This is the memory loss disease again. Is it not? You lose your memories? So sad. He shook his head slowly in pity. I read about this, but I admit it baffles me. Why does your species not cure this? Wait, you think forgetting things is a disease? Asked Madison. This is obvious. Is it not? What is the advantage of losing information? Can we back up to the part where you remember everything all the way back to the beginning of your species? Asked Ryan. That is ridiculous, Ryan. There is no beginning of a species, and we do not magically transfer memories from one generation to the next. I only remember the things I've experienced. We know our history from stories. Stories which are retold without embellishment? Asked Madison, disappointed at the idea of bland stories about ordinary things. Of course. What is the advantage of altering them? I'm dying to know then, said Ryan anxiously. Tell us about your history. 316 changed several colors, apparently shocked at the magnitude of the request. That would take many years to tell. The high points then? Very well. 400 million years ago, my species lived in the sea. We were similar to the squid and octopus of your world. Plants, fungi, mollusks, and other delicious things existed on land, but no larger animals. We found the delights of the food at the edge of the water and regularly supplemented our diet with those things. Individuals who could reach farther out of the water fared better in times of stress, as did others who could climb completely out for short periods. As the number of land-dwelling species grew, so did our menu. Eventually, the genes that coded for the ability to harvest more oxygen from the air were propagated to a generation that could stay out for days before needing to return to the water. Our boneless limbs were well suited to moving on the land at the water's edge, but not for venturing farther inland. This changed following another mutation. This is the one which reduced the number of limbs to 5. We call it the leap. A single individual was born so different that he was initially shunned by the others. He had only 5 limbs compared to their 8, but his limbs had rudimentary bones which allowed him to stand much as I do. While standing, he towered over his peers and contemplated how best to murder them in their sleep. 316 laughed his trilling laugh, and his face changed colors. Let me guess. That's where your sense of humor comes from? Asked Ryan with a touch of sarcasm. Of course. All the others were dull. He had a much larger brain. 5 times larger, in fact, since it was in many ways 5 separate brains. He had many offspring. It marked a turning point for our species. Within 1 million years, we became, as you see me today, nature's perfection. By then, there were many species of reptiles, mammals, and birds on the land. There was much competition, and there were many predators. The history beyond that point is mostly about technology, which was very slow at first. By the time we had learned to control fire, 1 million years had passed. After that, most inventions revolved around hunting and fishing. We had spread to every part of our world. As we did, we drove one species after another to extinction. Wars over the dwindling food supply raged and nearly drove our own species to extinction. This is why we have a strong taboo against killing animals. But you eat fish, said Madison, confused. 316 flashed through several colors. But they were never alive. They came from a food machine. Do you not have this technology? No? Well, almost, said Ryan. I read about a steak made by a machine, but it took a month and cost a year's salary. This clearly upset 316. His face continued to change colors, but at a slower rate. I see, was all he said. Are all the other species extinct now? Asked Madison, saddened by the idea of a nearly dead planet. There are a few others. There are wild pigs. Someone brought back a species of cow, and now there are herds in the grasslands. There are at least 3 species of birds, but I have never seen one. Some of my people have bestiaries where they keep small numbers of exotic species they have brought back from extinction. Some of us believe nature will rebound on its own, and fish will return to the sea. So there are no fish at all. Weren't you fishing when we met you? At your fishing house? Asked Ryan sarcastically. 316 shook his head. The food maker technology came too late. The fish were the first to go. We like fish. After that, the other extinctions followed quickly. Having a fishing house is just a tradition for now. I have not given up hope that one day I will catch one. Wow, said Madison, reeling from the idea of fishing for years and never catching anything. And I thought fishing was boring on our world. At least we have the possibility of catching something. The enjoyment is not in the catching of fish. If one caught a fish immediately every time, it would just be work. It is the anticipation of catching fish that makes it enjoyable. That is basic game theory. I have extended the good part, that is all. Imagine the exultation when I finally catch one after so long. He seemed to slip into a reverie for a few moments before snapping back. Tell me more about your world. I'm fascinated by marsupials. Do you think a kangaroo would let me ride in its pouch? No, said Ryan, firmly shaking his head. Madison snickered at the thought. Pity? Can they not be reasoned with? There's no reasoning with a kangaroo, said Ryan, with surprising authority. That's a hard no. Are you sure? I can be very persuasive. Oh well, I'm also keen to learn more about earthquake insurance, homeopathy, and daylight saving time. Daniel attempted to explain these, but they failed to make any sense to me at all. I am creating a slideshow for the next festival on the off chance that these things are not a prank that he has played on me.